The Denver Broncos have fired Nathaniel Hackett after only 15 games. Hackett has been terrible, and Denver has been a complete and utter disaster this season. The Broncos traded for Russell Wilson in the offseason, and it felt like Denver had the pieces to compete, but that has not been the case. The Broncos are 4-11, and were just mathematically eliminated from the playoffs for the 7th consecutive season. Denver has made some truly awful decisions that have crippled the franchise, and the Broncos have to find a way to dig out of a huge hole. The Broncos fired Nathaniel Hackett on Monday after a 4-11 start and a 51-14 blowout loss to the Rams on Sunday.
Oh, damn! I'm sorry.
Hackett has been criticized all season for questionable decision-making, poor offense, and losing games despite a top defense in the league. He got off on the wrong foot immediately. In week 1, despite having 3 timeouts ahead of a 4th and 5 midfield with over a minute remaining, Hackett let the clock run down and attempted a 64-yard field goal that Brandon McManus missed wide left.
No, stop! What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing with your life?
He was criticized again in week 2 for clock management and hired Jerry Rosburg to assist him in game and clock management. Rosburg is now the interim head coach. Hackett was expected to be an offensive guru to help Denver, primarily on the offensive side of the ball. He spent 3 seasons as the offensive coordinator in Green Bay and had success. The Packers' offense was good, and Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs. Before that, he was previously a coordinator for the Jaguars, Bills, and at Syracuse. The failures of Nathaniel Hackett were on full display in Week 16. The Rams have not been very good this season at all. Los Angeles is on its 4th starting quarterback, Baker Mayfield, and we're 4-10 coming into the game versus the Broncos, and the Rams absolutely blasted Denver. Dalton Reisner got into it on the sideline with backup quarterback Brett Ripon in the 3rd quarter after Russell Wilson was sacked on back-to-back plays. Reisner pushed Ripon, and you can clearly hear someone yell, "Do something, Brett." It wasn't the only example of tempers. Randy Gregory threw his helmet after a Rams touchdown in the first half and was benched later after he was flagged for a late hit on Mayfield. Gregory got in more heat after the game. Both teams were heading into the locker room, and he and Ode Ibushi exchanged some words. Gregory punched him, and Ibushi returned with a punch of his own. They were both suspended for a game for the altercation. Everything about the game was a mess, and it led to the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett is only the 5th coach since the merger to not finish his first season, joining Urban Meyer as the only 2 to accomplish the feat in the last decade. The Broncos haven't shown patience with head coaches in recent memory, but less than 1 year is early. Josh McDaniels and Vance Joseph were both only around for 2 seasons. Vic Fangio was in Denver for 3. John Fox led the Broncos to a Super Bowl and was fired a year later. It's worth noting that Hackett was also the first Broncos head coach under the Walton Penner Group, who purchased the franchise in the offseason. There were essentially 3 finalists for the head coaching job, including Nathaniel Hackett. The others, Kevin O'Connell, who was hired by the Vikings and has led Minnesota to a 12-3 record and an NFC North crown, and Dan Quinn, who is the Cowboys defensive coordinator and is likely the frontrunner for the Broncos head coaching job. Quinn was the Falcons head coach from 2015 to 2020, and he did lead Atlanta to a Super Bowl appearance, but we all know how that ended. The Broncos came into this season with high expectations, but have disappointed in every way. Denver believed it was only a few pieces away from being a contender after last year, and that missing piece was assumed to be quarterback. So the Broncos went out and got one, Russell Wilson. Denver traded 2 firsts, a 2nd, a 5th, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris for Wilson in a 4th. The Broncos inked Russ to a 5-year, $245 million extension. He is locked up in Denver through 2028. That is a long, long way away. The Broncos really put their entire future in the hands of Russell Wilson, and that's looking like a huge mistake. That trade looks horrible in hindsight. Denver has been bad enough for that first-round pick this offseason to be third after Week 16. However, that selection is the Seahawks'. After trading away Wilson, Seattle may have a top 3 pick and are fighting for a wild card spot. Geno Smith is a Pro Bowler, and he's been amazing. He's thrown for 3,886 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while completing 70.7% of his passes. It looks like Pete Carroll absolutely fleeced the Broncos. A big question I want to be answered this offseason is how severe Russell Wilson's injuries have been. He has been dealing with injuries all season long, but it's hard to say how much that's hindered him. He was dealing with a shoulder injury that is usually a baseball injury. Wilson had a procedure in October and suffered a hamstring injury in Week 6, and it was reportedly partially torn. He missed the Broncos Week 15 game versus the Cardinals due to a concussion, and Brett Rypien led Denver to a victory. Denver has been bad, but injuries have just crushed them. The offensive line has been decimated. Left tackle Garrett Bowles broke his leg. Right tackle Billy Turner returned from injury reserve in Week 15 after he missed time with a knee injury, and center Lloyd Cushenberry is still on injured reserve due to a groin injury. Wide receiver Tim Patrick tore his ACL before the regular season. Jerry Jeudy missed time with an ankle injury, and KJ Hamler dealt with a hamstring injury. More than anything, the running back room completely blew up. Javonte Williams was supposed to have a huge breakout season, but ended up going down with a torn ACL. The guys behind him were Melvin Gordon, who was waived because of fumbling issues, and Mike Boone, who has been on injured reserve since Week 7 with an ankle injury. I really thought that the Denver Broncos would be good this season. I did say that I thought it was a bit egregious to say that Denver could win the division or anything. The Chiefs are king, and I thought that the Chargers were going to be true contenders, but I thought Denver would be really good. I expected the Broncos to be a wild card team, or at least be in contention for the postseason. Everything has just blown up in Denver. I didn't have too much of an opinion on the Nathaniel Hackett hire. He clearly had a lot of success in Green Bay, but now it does seem like a lot of that was on the back of Matt LaFleur manning the offense. It is odd that Hackett left and the Packers offense has struggled, but I think a lot more of that is credit to Davante Adams, not Nathaniel Hackett. At the same time, I thought the trade for Russell Wilson was smart. Russell Wilson was so good in Seattle at times, and he was a clearly elite quarterback, but that hasn't been the case at all in Denver. It's very telling that the Seahawks have been good at times this season and are literally in the mix for the playoffs right now. It makes you wonder how much of the Seahawks' success was Pete Carroll versus Russell Wilson, and obviously the Seattle defense is the biggest reason why Wilson won that first Super Bowl. It's hard to say what the Broncos do from here. Wilson is locked up for a long time, and Denver needs that to work. I feel like it will at some point. Wilson has been off this year, but he's only 34. He's got to be able to figure things out. The huge decision now is who the Broncos decide to hire as their next head coach. Dan Quinn is fine, but that leaves a massive question as to who is going to run the offense, because that's going to be the key to offensive success, and Nathaniel Hackett was not the answer.
Broncos country, let's ride.